Hola. Good morning. Welcome to all of you. Joy to be with you on this gorgeous day in this magnificent environment with good spiritual friends and sublime Dharma. Let's begin by arousing the most meaningful motivation we can, each of us, according to our own lights and according to our own views. Of course, in Mahayana Buddhism, it is bodhicitta. I can't imagine a more noble aspiration and determination than the aspiration and the commitment to achieve the perfect awakening of a Buddha in order to be of greatest possible service to the whole world. And in Buddhism, when we speak of the whole world, it's no smaller than the world according to modern cosmology, with its 2 trillion galaxies. I always gasp when I even think of that. It really blows my mind. But the Buddhist worldview is no smaller. In fact, it's greater, because the 2 trillion galaxies are just in this little flat level of the desire realm. But beyond that, far greater is the form realm. Beyond that, far greater is the formless realm. And then there's the ultimate ground of being. So let's arouse this motivation, or our closest approximation of it, quietly, each of us in our own way, and then I'll lead a very, very short meditation. And with this as our motivation for coming here this morning, for listening, reflecting, and engaging in the practice, with this as the motivation, then the time together becomes immensely meaningful by the motivation alone. And now with this motivation, for just a very short time, I invite you to draw your awareness inwards, away from, withdrawn from the 5 sensory fields, your access to the outside world. And direct your awareness inwards upon this inner world that is no less vast than the outer world. The world of your thoughts, memories, images, desires, emotions, the whole array of mental events and processes. Draw your awareness into this field, this space of awareness. And note the movements, the change, constantly taking place in this field of thoughts, desires, memories, all manner of mental events arising and passing, arising and passing. But in the midst of these many movements of the mind, can you relax so deeply, mentally, that in the midst of those movements you come to a stillness? Not a point. They could move from here to there. But an inner stillness that is spacious, does not move any more than space can move. Can you identify this inner space? in its intrinsic stillness and rest there. And that's very stillness that is luminous, bright, and cognizant, discerning. That stillness is your portal to a deeper dimension, a deeper flow, a continuum of consciousness that precedes this life and carries on afterwards. The bhavanga, the ground of becoming, the substrate consciousness. This is where you will find it. And it is here also that you will find the deepest dimension of consciousness, primordial consciousness, with no center, no periphery, no beginning, no end. As vast as space itself. This is the portal, this inner silence here and now. Lasso. Now let's turn our awareness once again outwards. Experiencing our embodiment, our environment, our fellow sentient beings. And turning our minds to the Dharma. So I think, as all of you know, this talk this morning is part of a sequence. I think it traces back to last January, when we've gradually gone through the cultivation of three types of intelligence. You might recall way back in January, the developing cognitive intelligence, developing wise desires, motivations, aspirations, intentions, so that we can actually find what we're seeking. Be wise in our desires. Wise in the way we conduct ourselves, by way of body, speech, and mind, in solitude and with others and with the environment. Be wise in our conduct, so that our conduct is conducive to our own and others' genuine well-being. Let's be wise in how we behave. And then cultivating attention, cultivating what we already have, but like a raw metal that hasn't been refined. Attention, introspection, mindfulness, samadhi, developing attentional intelligence. An untapped reservoir in this modern world, almost untapped. You can go through postdoctoral research at a major university and never have one day of learning how to train your attention. Amazing that we overlook this. We're so smart, and it's so ridiculous to overlook this. We've hardly even begun. Whereas India has been working on this for 5,000 years. They're so far ahead of us, we can't even imagine how far down the road. Classical India, the Brahmanic tradition, the Buddhist tradition, and so on. And then, because the root of all suffering is ignorance, there are many derivative causes. There are many cooperative conditions that lead to our suffering, our pain, our misery. But when we scale them all back, right down to the very source, it comes down to ignorance. Ignorance and then delusion, not knowing the nature of reality and getting it wrong. And so because it's so central for understanding all the strife in the world, all the misery in the world, all the violations that we are committing against our environment and other species, why, we ask, we can be shocked, we human beings, that we're so intelligent, but how can we be so, shall I say, simply insane, the way we're treating our own environment, let alone other species and so forth. And it comes down, it's not a mystery. It's not a moot question. Oh, why? And then think there's no answer. There is an answer. It's called ignorance. And therefore, the antidote to ignorance is cognitive intelligence. Right? So we've lingered there. And I want to, time is passing so quickly, but from my perspective. But before going into this immensely rich material today, these are not notes for the first time. This is a text. A very brief review of our last session together in this sequence. It was the cultivation of cognitive intelligence, part 1. Now, I spent probably an hour and a half on that 6 weeks ago. But I just want to highlight, because if you haven't listened to that talk, this talk, you won't have the preparation for it. You'll understand a bit intellectually, and then it'll just go right in and right on out. So the last one is crucially important. Cultivation of cognitive intelligence, part 1. And so very brief summary. I was just reviewing my notes this morning. The Buddha in this little Dharma talk, the cook, gives this analogy. And I'm not going to give it all over again. I gave it 6 weeks ago, so if you haven't listened, I suggest go back and listen to it. It's terrific material. I hope I simply can present it without distortion and with clarity. But he's simply pointing out this, that if you want to cultivate insight, wisdom, knowledge, the type of knowledge that frees you from suffering, frees you from the roots of suffering, so that you can truly be free, not only in this lifetime, but any possible future lifetimes, then Vipaśyanā is the key. The cultivation of cognitive intelligence is the key. In the first turning wheel of Dharma, the 4 applications of mindfulness, of the body, feelings, mind, and then phenomena. That's the key. That's the paradigmatic, quintessential cultivation of cognitive intelligence for the whole of the first turning wheel of Dharma. And within the 4 applications of mindfulness, any one of which is sufficient for achieving liberation, I plucked out the close application of mindfulness to the mind. I'm sure you recall that. But the crucial point here, widely overlooked, almost universally overlooked, throughout Southeast Asia and Theravada Buddhist countries, Mahayana countries, Dharma centers all over the world, Vipassana centers all over the world, a point that's often, very often overlooked, is what the Buddha said in this little discourse, taking the analogy of a cook, and that is for us to reap the full benefit of engaging in Vipaśyanā, the cultivation of contemplative insight, of cognitive intelligence, for that to bear its full fruit, for those meditations to yield the benefits for which they were designed. And that's not just to have a happier day, or have a little bit less stress, or a bit of inner calm. That's fine. Try Valium. It's not just for that. It's complete, irreversible freedom. For that to occur, to engage in those 4 applications in a way that was exactly what the Buddha intended, you must first acquire the sign of the mind. That term hardly even gets bandied about nowadays. But it's crucially important. And I unpacked definitively and authoritatively, because not my authority, I don't have any, but I went back to the source. What is the sign of the mind? The acquisition of which enables you, primes you, prepares you to fully engage in Vipaśyanā. So it liberates you forever from ignorance, from all mental afflictions, and all the evil, all the misery that's aroused by mental afflictions. Imagine it, to be still present in this world and be free of suffering and its causes. It's possible. Hardly anybody says that. In this lifetime, hardly anybody says that. Modern science, forget about it. Hopeless. What is the sign of the mind? Everything hinges on that. And the definitive answer is not open to debate. It's true. This is what the Buddha meant. He was referring to the bhavanga, the ground of becoming, that subtle continuum of consciousness that carries on from lifetime to lifetime, and from which your mind, during the formation of the fetus in your mother's womb, you weren't born with a mind. That little union of egg and sperm doesn't have a mind like we think of it. It's an egg and sperm, for heaven's sakes. Doesn't have any neurons, but it does have consciousness. And the consciousness it came in with is this bhavanga, the substrate consciousness. And then as the nervous system develops, it gets configured and conditioned and transforms into a human mind. And with the various sense faculties, the visual, the auditory, and so forth. This is where your mind comes from. And this is the undercurrent that you slip into every time you fall back into deep sleep. You don't have a mind. You don't have a woman's mind, a Mexican mind, an American mind when you're in deep sleep. You're not old or young, rich or poor. It's just, all that's left is this bhavanga, a deep, dreamless sleep. And then you start dreaming, and then, oh, now you have a personality. And then you wake up, and oh, you get your mind back again. Where did it come from in that first moment of dreaming, that first moment of waking? Where did the mind come from? Because you didn't have one at 2:30 in the morning if you were in deep sleep at that time. Well, it came from that. And when you die, your human mind that arises in dependence upon which and is heavily conditioned by your brain, your nervous system, genetics, the environment, your upbringing, and so forth, what happens when you breathe your last? It's complete mindless superstition, blind faith to think it just vanishes. It's a nice, comforting thought. Rest in peace. Now you get your well-deserved sleep. Baloney. I mean, it's a really nice thought, but so is Santa Claus. But just because something is appealing doesn't mean we should believe in it. And to believe that we just get to go into a deep sleep forever. Oh, how sweet. Complete bollocks. But it's a sweet thought. Mind doesn't vanish. Any more than matter and energy vanish, it dissolves back into the bhavanga, and on you go, the next phase of your journey. I'm lingering too long, but this is too important. I want to refresh, because this will not have much impact if you don't really fathom the impact of the last talk. And that is, if you want to practice Vipassana effectively, acquire the sign of the mind. How do you do that? Shamatha. Achieve shamatha. Let your coarse mind dissolve into the subtle mind, and now you come out of that, and you are ready. You are now ready to fully engage in Vipassana and the union of Vipassana, Shamatha and Vipassana. And that was the Buddha's, perhaps his greatest discovery, Gautama. He was born into an already immensely rich contemplative culture, thousands of years old before he came along, but what he introduced afresh, union of Shamatha and Vipassana. But for that, Shamatha is indispensable. Not to start practicing Vipassana. You can start today. We should start today if we've not begun already. But to bring it to fruition, full maturation. And that close application of mindfulness of mind is quintessential contemplative psychology. It is not philosophy. It's not religion. Go back and read that one paragraph that I translated from the sutta. There's nothing philosophical there at all. You know what a philosophical question when you see it. There aren't any in there. And it's certainly not religion. There's no mention of faith or belief or worship or anything like that. Quintessential contemplative psychology. I have to give this analogy. In terms of understanding the natural world, there's a great, and for the West, European, Eurocentric view. I'm not touching India for right now, but for whole Judeo-Christian, Greco-Roman, that is Western civilization based in the Mediterranean. There were natural philosophers going back to Democritus, Pythagoras, and others, going back 2,500 years. Natural philosophy has been here all along, right? Copernicus was a natural philosopher. Kepler was a natural philosopher. They learned a lot, including about the stars, planets, the sun and moon. They could predict eclipses and so forth. But then comes along one more brilliant mathematician, as was Copernicus. His name was Galileo. He was one more really outstanding mathematician. But what he did, which nobody else before him had done, is he refined a technology to be able to make precise observations of the sun, moon, stars, and planets. He developed his own technology for making precise measurements of movements of terrestrial phenomena. He was the first scientist because he developed the appropriate technology for studying the sun, moon, planets, and stars, and for studying terrestrial phenomena. He wasn't just dropping balls off the Tower of Pisa, but also technology he devised to determine whether balls rolling down a ramp accelerated or went at constant velocity. He was the first scientist in all of European civilization, and he was looking at the outer world, not the inner world. And then everything after that is built on what he started. Before him, it was pre-scientific. Lots of natural philosophy, very smart people, lots of knowledge. But he was the scientist, and after that, when you have science. And this exponential growth of knowledge of the objective, physical, quantifiable, external world. Amazing. Samadhi is the telescope for the mind. There is pre-contemplative psychology, and there's post-contemplative psychology. It's the same gravitas, import, as the introduction of telescope into astronomy. If you don't have samadhi, you don't really have a science of the mind, anything comparable to what was developed in the Landa tradition. So that's the Buddha. First samadhi, identify your center point, and then move on to vipassana. Now that was all phenomenological, observing the phenomena, the appearances, the arising of mental afflictions, the absence of mental afflictions, the mind when it's contracted, the mind when it is diffuse, or distracted. The factors of origination giving rise to mental states, the factors of dissolution, all of this empirical, phenomenological in appearances. How do phenomena dissolve away and vanish? How do they arise? This is science. It's the same questions that biologists have been asking, and astronomers and physicists and botanists and zoologists and so forth and so on. And in the medical profession, how did it arise? What's its nature? How do we get rid of it? Or how does it vanish? That's science. Brilliant science. Phenomenological. Okay, that was 24 minutes to get to today. 24 years ago, the summer of 1990, then, I had gotten to know Gyatso Rinpoche. I viewed him as my Lama. In the summer of 1990, then for the very first time, he asked me to come and interpret for him. Coming down from Oregon, he went down to Los Angeles and gave a weekend seminar, workshop, at the Los Angeles Shambhala Meditation Center. And he chose 2 chapters from a monumental work by Chakmé from the 17th century. And that commentary was great commentary to Mingyur Dorjé's Buddhahood in the Palm of Your Hand. It's a vast text. And it's many, many chapters. And each chapter was actually the summation or the transcript of a one-day teaching he gave. This has been a lot of hours, I think. It must have been. In this vast text, Gyatso Rinpoche pulled out just 2 chapters. The chapter on Vipassana is about 15 pages, in English translation, 15 pages, single-spaced. And then he taught that on a Saturday, and I was serving as an interpreter. And then next day, he then focused on the next chapter, the chapter on Vipassana, again about 15 pages, single-spaced. Again, I interpreted. And that was my introduction to his teaching publicly, and with myself being his voice in English. I was blown away, just utterly blown away by these 2 teachings on Śamatha and Vipaśyanā, which had been central to my own focus for quite some time, by 1990. But now bringing this fully into the Mahamudra tradition, and with this tremendous erudition of Karma Chakmé, as if he'd memorized the whole Kagyü and the whole Tengyur, but then plucked out the very essence. And for each of these 2 chapters, then he cites source after source after source, and puts them all into a garland of quotations. He does the same thing for Vipassana, whole bunch of sources all over the place, all coherent, but a garland. And then the last 3 pages of his presentation on Vipassana is what I've translated here. I've translated both commentaries in collaboration with Eva, and they'll be published about more than a year from now in a whole anthology on Śamatha and Vipaśyanā. But it's just the last 3 pages that we're focusing on today, after he's given all these sources and many, many citations and so forth all over the place. But then he just sits down and he addresses his audience. Now here's what I've got to tell, here's what I, Karma Chame, here's what I have to tell you. You must fathom the actual nature of your mind. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. But I'm not going to give you the right answers. In almost all presentations, they tell you the right answer. And you memorize it. If you're really smart, you kind of understand it. And if you're really smart, you can teach it. Oh, I've learned this. I can talk about it. And you talk about it and maybe give a really good Dharma talk. But he doesn't give you the answers. He gives you questions. Six weeks ago, the phenomenological nature of the mind. How does it appear? This is what scientists study all over the place. How do planets appear? How do plants appear? How do they vanish? And how are they? And so forth. Science is largely a study of phenomena. It was only in the early 19th century that physicists, the granddaddy of all the branches of modern science, started asking. They were compelled to ask, well, this is how things appear, but how do they actually exist? The difference between how things appear and how they exist, that's a philosophical question. If you don't raise that, you just assume that things exist as they appear. Naive realism. But quantum mechanics forced the pioneers in this discipline to question what had gone unquestioned pretty much for the whole history of Western science, that everything's already really out there. Atoms, particles, waves, fields are already out there, and we're just trying to represent what God created or what just came out of the Big Bang. But quantum physicists recognized there's a question we haven't been asking. How do they actually exist? Do they exist independently of a system of measurement, or do they relate to a system of measurement and to our concepts, subject-object? How do they relate? They ask these questions, and there's no clear consensus among them to this day. But they're asking the questions, and this is where His Holiness says, in all the branches of Western science, this is the one where you can see some very, very meaningful interface with Madhyamaka. The teachings that we'll cover today, I'm giving myself a half hour as a prelude, are based thoroughly in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. The perfection of wisdom, or the transcendence of wisdom, the Prajnaparamita, Nagarjuna's systematization of these teachings in his middle way view, Madhyamaka, utterly rooted in Madhyamaka. So this, what we'll cover today, this is contemplative philosophy. And we'll see that in the text itself. It's asking questions for which you can't get an answer by just looking mindfully. No, you have to bring out a very sharp sword of intelligence and question. And he's going to give us a whole series of questions. There's no religion in sight. This is philosophy. The love of wisdom, to know reality as it is, and above all, to know the actual nature of your own mind. Because we are called sentient beings in English translation. The Tibetan term sem chen, which means mind havers, mind possessors, is because we are mind possessors that we are sentient beings. It's because we are mind possessors that we suffer. Mind possessors, that is, we have appropriated the activities of the mind, the thoughts, the emotions, memories, and so we appropriate them, identify with them, grasp to them. And it's like going out there into the surrounding here and gathering up a whole bunch of those little prickly cactuses and picking them with your bare hands, and they're just taking off your shirt. Ladies, keep your bra on. And just, I love cactuses. Oh, but I'm suffering so much. But I love cactuses because they're my cactuses. But I'm really suffering. But they're mine. The cactuses are your mind. You don't own them, but it sure feels that way. Let's see what Karma Chamet has to say. Plucking out just the last 3 pages of chapter 16, which is called the analytical cultivation of Vipassana according to the Pith Instructions held in common. Held in common means these are teachings that are common to Sutrayana and Vajrayana, to Sutrayana and Mahamudra, common to both, indispensable for both. And the next chapter, he'll go into Vipassana that is uncommon, and that is unique Vipassana teachings that are unique to Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And this is, again, excerpt from his commentary, a great commentary to Mingyur Dorjé's Buddhahood in the palm of your hand, chapter 16. And I think there's a very meaningful reason why Gyatso Rinpoche invited me to, for the very first time, translate for him publicly on the preceding chapter, Śamatha, and this one in Vipassana. It made an indelible mark in my mind. So now we begin. The great compassionate one, an epithet of Avalokiteshvara, states in his commentary to this, however and whatever you may think, however and whatever you may recall, whatever you see, whatever you are aware of, observe its essential nature. He starts out with this boom, that's like root text. The teachings of Avalokiteshvara himself. When we simply observe, we go out for a walk and we observe the environment. Or we're sitting quietly observing the mind. Thoughts, emotions, mental afflictions, compassion, and so forth. What we are observing, what presents itself to us, is the manifest nature. How do things appear? What do they look like? What color are sunflowers? What color is the sky? Is it hot today or is it cold? Does your body feel pleasant? Does it, and that's the manifest nature, what's showing itself to us. But the essential nature entails fathoming, piercing, probing into, penetrating into, how is it exactly? The colors that we see, are they really out there? They certainly seem to be. But are they really out there? Are they there in the fabric of a woman's blouse? The sounds that we hear, are they really out there traveling, sounds actually traveling through space? And likewise, smells and taste, tactile sensations, this is firm. Is the firmness out there? Is it really out there? Do things exist as they appear? If not, how do they exist? The essential nature is probing right into the actual nature of phenomena. And so he says, don't be satisfied just to be mindful. Oh, it's a pretty day. Oh, it's pleasant. Oh, I like red. Penetrate it. This is Vipassana. And it takes intelligence. And now we have Karma Chamet summing up his own Pith Instructions on Vipassana. And he writes, and he says, this is written down, that's the meaning. So from now until tomorrow's Dharma teaching session, he's coming to the end of the day, right? On day 16, presumably. So from now until tomorrow's Dharma teaching session, it's very important that each of you carefully seek out your own mind. He's giving them one day. Because next day he's going to go into a more advanced topic, and the next day onwards right into Mahamudra, and I think he probably covers Tekchut and Tutgel in the Dzogchen as well, because in this Namchu, or space Dharma teaching, they're uniting, he is uniting, Mahamudra and Dzogchen. But it's very important that each of you carefully seek out your own mind. Now, I would like for the time together to be meditative and not just discursive and analytical and conceptual. When he says, seek out your own mind, what's he referring to? What's he referring to? Philosophers throughout history have had all kinds of ideas about mind. Many, many ideas about mind. Hindus and Buddhist neuroscientists saying the mind is simply what the brain does, and so on and so on and so on. Behaviorists saying mind is simply a disposition for behavior. Many, many views. So when he says seek out your own mind, well, what exactly is the referent that he's telling us to seek out? Hegel's view? Shankar's view? Pythagoras' view? Whose view? Psychologist's view? Neuroscientist's view? Whose view? There are all kinds of views out there. Never mind all that. Never mind all what other people say. Never mind what other people think and believe about nature of mind. The question is really, do you believe you have a mind? Or do you believe that's only for other people? You didn't get one. You missed out. You're just walking around like a mindless zombie. Do you think you have a mind? In other words, are you a sentient being, a mind possessor? Do you think you have a mind? Have you appropriated a mind? What he's asking is, when you think I have a mind, or my mind is depressed, my mind is agitated, I'm feeling very happy and my mind is happy. I'm feeling hopeless, I'm feeling despair, I'm feeling compassionate, I'm really feeling cold and aloof. My mind is numb, my mind is drowsy, my mind is sharp and clear, my mind is energetic, my mind is apathetic. That mind, what you think is your mind, not somebody else, never mind everybody else. What do you think, what kind of mind do you think you have? One mind per sentient being, right? One body, everybody gets one body, one mind. What's your idea? What do you think your mind is? When you talk about your mind, appropriate it, conceive of it. Now, when you have a sense of what you think your mind is, what you have a body, but not just a body for heaven's sakes. You have all kinds of things that are not tangible, not corporeal, not material. Emotions, thoughts, feelings, there's nothing physical about them. It's an absurd idea. They're clearly not physical. Seek it out. That which you regard as your mind, seek it out, he says. It's very important that each of you carefully seek out your mind. And then immediately he goes to location. Is your mind located inside or outside of your body? So again, I'd like you not simply to listen and then maybe forget it by the end of the talk, but act as if you're listening to him right now. And he's telling you right now, not after the session, not tonight, it'll be too late, you'll probably be drowsy, then you'll miss the chance, and then it's going to be tomorrow. But as you're listening, ask of yourself, is your mind located inside or outside of your body? Now, he gave his students only one day, and he said, tomorrow report. So, boy, this is really intensive, right? We have 6 weeks. So we're the slowpoke community. We're the ones that kind of tag along, the slow learners. But we have 6 weeks before the next one. So you have a little bit more breathing space. But ask of yourself, is your mind located inside or outside of your body? If you have a mind, it must be someplace, right? It's not on the moon. It's not in the bowels of the earth. It's not next door. Where is it? Where is your mind? What's your sense? Look for it, inside or outside of your body. If it's inside, from your brain, at the crown of your head, down to the soles of your feet, where does it reside among your 5 solid organs and 6 hollow organs? This is simply a list of the internal organs according to Tibetan medicine. But if it's inside your body, it's going to be someplace between here and the soles of your feet. Where? If you think your mind is inside your body, where is it? And don't, as the Buddha said in his discourse to the Kalamas, don't believe something just because a whole bunch of other people believe it. His whole theme there, be skeptical about authority, about tradition, hearsay, what your guru says, what people say, the majority rule, as if truth is determined by vote. Never mind all of that. Be skeptical of all that stuff in your environment. People presuming to know things that they actually don't know at all. They just believe. And uncritically. So you've probably heard that the mind is in the brain. Where's the evidence? Because they're correlated? Give me a break. It's infantile thinking that if two things are correlated, they have to be located in the same place. Like a light switch and a light. Come on. They're correlated. But just because brain activity is correlated with, arises together with, and influences mental phenomena, doesn't mean the mind is inside the brain. Nobody's ever seen it. There's no evidence. So I'm not going to belabor that point. It's simply to say there's no reason in the world to believe the mind is in the head. So don't believe it just because a lot of people believe it. Well, people believe all kinds of nonsense. And then he sums up what our paragraph here. Where is your mind located? Think about this and then search. Think about this is philosophy. Search is contemplative. Philosophers think a lot. I don't think they search much, because they just write paper after paper, book after book, defending their own views and refuting other people's views. And since the time of Pythagoras, they've never agreed on anything, Western philosophers. They just make their profession of disagreeing with each other. And that's true to the present day. Get a PhD in philosophy and make sure you say something different from everybody else, otherwise you won't get your PhD. So, think about this and then search. But now Karma Chakmé, in the immediately preceding chapter, at the very end of it on Śamatha, he says Śamatha is indispensable for Vipaśyanā. He's echoing the views of the Buddha 2,300 years earlier. The more powerful your Śamatha, the more powerful will be your Vipaśyanā. If you may have a mind that is untrained in Śamatha, mindfulness, introspection, samadhi, then you can have a real intellectual trip studying Madhyamaka and studying texts like this and thinking about it a lot. You might even get a whole bunch of right answers. And will it even touch your mental afflictions? Will it decrease pride in any way? Decrease attachment, hostility, impatience, arrogance, and so forth? Chances are probably not. It will just make you a real smart aleck. You can talk a real talk, but it has actually gone home and addressed your own grasping to your own inherent existence. Not likely. Not likely. So then you're just going through a whole routine of teaching Madhyamaka, studying it, thinking about it, and then debating it and teaching other people, and giving them the burden to carry on to the next generation. Think about it, but then search, and search where it gets up close and personal. Your mind, where is it? If you think your mind is located inside your heart, and Tibetans often point to mind here, here. If you actually think it's inside your heart organ, then where is it? Is it in the epicardium, which is the outermost layer of the heart, or in the pericardial fat, which surrounds and covers the heart? Or is it in the flesh of the heart? Or is it in the blood? Exactly where is your mind located? Because the heart's not just one chunk of heart, a bunch of parts. Where is it? And what's your evidence? If you come up with an opinion, opinions are cheap. But if you have to think it's actually in your heart, where? And what's your evidence? You think it's in the brain, fine. What's your evidence? And don't tell me, oh, because this part is activated when you think this or feel that. That's just so juvenile thinking. It's amazing anybody takes it seriously. But we continue. Maybe it's not inside. Maybe the flesh is the people who wear their hearts on their sleeves. Maybe your mind's out here on the surface. So if it's located in the exterior of the body, where is it? On the upper, the lower region, or at the front or the back? And moreover, the mind exists outside. If you think, no, this body is very contained. It's got a covering. It's got a container. But my mind is much larger. My imagination, my memories, is much larger, and maybe it's out there someplace. He said, well, if the mind exists outside, where is it located? In the east, south, west, north, above or below? Exactly where is it? And you see, if you're going to give an affirmative, it's based on sheer conjecture, just believing. He doesn't want you to just believe. You remember the whole series here was believers, contemplatives, and the future of human civilization. Belief is so easy. Just believe what your daddy said. Believe what your parents said. Believe what your political leaders say. Believe what your school teachers say. Just believe. That's easy. How to become a moron? Just believe. He's not giving us any slack for that at all. But now, from early on, from childhood on, we are extrospective. Children. We're aware of our bodies, of course, but we're aware of that little girl's body and this little boy's body, and here's a breast. Oh, I like that. I like milk. And here's this and here. And so we're looking outwards. We're seeing and we're hearing and smelling and tasting, and we're touching and putting things in our mouth. And so for little children, our knowledge of the world is almost entirely from the 5 physical senses. And when we're unhappy, we're not aware, oh, I see unhappiness is arising. It's just, wah, until somebody makes it go away. Well, some people never get out of that juvenile state of wanting to look outside for everything, even the mind. This is the absurdity of modern materialism. Well, we've succeeded so well in observing objective things. The mind must be objective too. Oh, I know, it's got to be the brain. Again, it's juvenile thinking. So if we go to our 5 senses and say, okay, we're going to search for the mind, maybe I should look for it. And so then you say, in this kind of naive way, your mind. What kind of a color does it have? Is your mind dark? Or is it bright and shiny? Have a color? Is it white, yellow, red, green, blue, or the like? Is it paisley? And what sort of a shape does it have? If the mind is real, and the mind's really out there, what kind of a shape does it have? Is it round, square, semicircular, triangular, or the like? And is the form of the mind beautiful or ugly, large or small? There was that movie called The Beautiful Mind, but was it really beautiful? The guy went insane. So how beautiful is that? You know? But is it beautiful? Or large or small? This person is very small-minded, this very big-minded. How big? How small? And that's all for looking at it. Is it sound? Does the mind make noise? Is it sound pleasant or unpleasant? If we say, this person really stinks, that person really stinks, probably referring to his mind, right? Not his body. If his body, that's get a bath. But does your mind have, is it fragrant or is it putrid? Does your mind have a smell? Is its taste bitter or sweet? Is it soft or rough to the touch? So again, you just went to the 5 physical senses. If you think for something to be real, it's got to be out there. It's real only if I can touch it or see it or smell it. Then okay, if you think the mind is real and you think you have one, then what does it look like and so forth. So that was pretty straightforward. But we kind of know that's silly, right? Nobody here really seriously thinks that your mind stinks, literally, like rotten cabbage, you know. Then he simply goes right to it. What's the actual nature of the mind? Don't tell me how it appears. We've already done that. We did that 6 weeks ago. But what's the actual nature of the mind? How does it actually exist? It's called neluk in Tibetan. It's mode of existence, not its nangluk, how it appears. And now this gets deeper and deeper very quickly. Are the body and the mind one, or are they distinct? You say body and mind, lusem. Body and mind. But are they in fact the same thing looked at from 2 different perspectives? Or are they totally separate? Like an apple and an orange? Totally separate? What are they? And then very quickly, he's just going to keep on pushing us harder and harder and harder to ask questions and not take any easy answers. There's not an answer here. It's all look for yourself. As the Buddha said, ehipasika, come and see for yourself. This is a perfect reflection of what the Buddha had to say in the Pali Canon. If the body and mind were one, when the body dies, does the mind die? Of course, that's the juvenile conclusion of materialists who can only see the body. And then when the body dies, I don't see the mind anymore, so I guess the mind isn't there either. It's juvenile. Really, it's juvenile. But if everybody around you believes it, and your professors believe it, then they teach you how to be stupid. It's called acquired delusion. When the body dies, the mind died. Well, how do you know, if you couldn't see it in the first place, how do you know whether it vanishes? And neuroscience never see the mind. They see neurons and all kinds of activities in the brain, but they never see the mind. So they have no idea any more than a plumber or an accountant what happens to the mind at death. No idea. Lots of beliefs presented with lots of confidence, but it's just belief. If they're the same, then when the body dies, does the mind die? Because the mind is simply a function of the body. Where's your evidence? That you can't see it anymore, but you never saw it in the first place. So come on, please be serious with me. Don't just splatter junk in my face. And if they are distinct, if the mind and the body are actually distinct, when the body is pain, why is the mind distressed? That's an interesting one, isn't it? If they're really separate, and the mind is simply like maybe just floating above the body, and you break a leg, why do we even have feelings? From an evolutionary perspective, why do we even have pain? You can program a robot to survive and still be a robot, but you don't need to program in feelings. They're unnecessary. There is no evolutionary explanation of why we have feelings. We could survive and procreate, which is what evolution is all about, without having consciousness or feelings. We don't need them to survive and procreate. We could just simply program, leg is broken, fix the leg, do not walk on the right leg, it will be broken, fix it, and when it's fixed, now you can walk. You don't need feelings like, it hurts. That doesn't help at all. If you just program to fix it, you'd fix your leg. So biologists have no idea why we have feelings. Let alone if the body's in pain, and you're feeling something, you've just got an abrasion or you broke a bone. But if the mind and body are totally separate, then the mind says, tough stuck down there in the basement, but I'm fine up here in the penthouse. Because I'm just experiencing mental feelings. And it's a happy day. The sunflowers are all in bloom. And the leg is broken. Hope you get better, but I'm not counting on it. If they're separate, then why does the mind care about the body at all? You know, just like a car that you don't really want, and it gets totaled. And you say, whoops. But it was an old Chevy got totaled. I'm riding a Mercedes-Benz here. I mean, the Chevy can get totaled or not. I don't care. Because I'm riding a Mercedes. The Mercedes is called my mind. So really, your mind, is your mind one or is it distinct from your body? Don't just accept what other people say. If you think the mind does not exist, and this is one of the ridiculous conclusions of some materialists, consciousness doesn't exist. I mean, there's just nothing so absurd that they won't say it. But if you seriously think your mind does not exist, maybe because you can't find it. He asks, who is it? And he does say who, I checked. He says, who is it? If your mind doesn't exist at all, that's just a fiction. And I've read some philosophers of mind that say mind is a fiction. And people actually read what they said. I had to because I took a course on it. But if you think the mind doesn't exist, it's just like Santa Claus or tooth fairies. Some people believe, children, silly people believe in it, but serious people don't. Who is it that gives rise to hatred, pride, envy, anger, faith, and pure vision? Don't we say they come from the mind? And there's a term in Tibetan that's called semjung, and they're mental processes like hatred, pride, etc., and faith, compassion, kindness, and wisdom. But these are called semjung, mental emergences, suggesting they emerge from the mind. That's Buddhist psychology. So if the mind doesn't exist, where are they emerging from? And please don't say the brain. I mean, there's just so much nonsense they can listen to, and after I just want to turn it off. The notion that hatred and so forth come from your brain, it's just such silly superstition. I just am tired of refuting it. So I won't. I'll just say, like that, and I'm done. You know. But he's making a very important point here. Who is it that gives rise to hatred? If you don't have a mind, but you get really pissed off at something happening in the world, either personally or in America politically and so forth and so on, what he's pointing out is a very important term, an issue, fact. Your mind has causal efficacy. You have a certain attitude, views, beliefs, background, presumptions, opinions, and so forth. They're all factors of the mind. And your hatred, anger, or envy, greed, hatred, and so forth these are coming from someplace, and those mental processes, hatred, pride, envy, anger, they have causal efficacy. Every war that's ever been fought, whether it's two spouses squabbling together, or whether it's the invasion of Ukraine, or et cetera, they all come from hatred. Arrogance, greed, the three poisons. All conflicts come from the mind. So don't tell me the mind doesn't exist, because hatred doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't come out of neurons, for heaven's sakes. So the mind has causal efficacy. Therefore, don't say it doesn't exist, because that's just too stupid for words. And then we can say, what is it that came to that conclusion? Of course, it's the mind. If you think the mind does exist, what kind of a thing is it? If you think it's both existent and non-existent, since existence and non-existence are mutually exclusive, that's impossible. So now you're just bumbling around with words like a drunk. Oh, it exists and it doesn't exist. Oh, shut up. Stop babbling nonsense. But make up your mind. Does it exist? If it does, how does it exist? If it doesn't exist, then what came to the conclusion it doesn't exist? And then he comes to the quintessential questions. It's one I would be given a paragraph all by itself. You have a mind, right? You didn't know it's your mind, the one that you take seriously, the one that influences you, makes you miserable and joyful, makes you enthusiastic about Dharma, makes you lose all hope. It's your mind, right? Your mind, whoever you are in this room, it didn't exist. Don't you agree? It didn't exist 100 years ago. Before your body ever came into existence, your mind, woman's mind, American, etc. So can't we agree on that 100 years ago? Your mind didn't exist anywhere in the universe. It was nowhere to be found. But now you have a mind. So we ask, from where did this mind first emerge? Where did the mind first emerge? He's speaking, allow me a philosophical term, ontologically. Phenomenologically, in terms of appearances, there's a substrate consciousness. It's a subtle mind. But it has no gender, ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. Gets configured, and then from that configuration, the interface between the nervous system and your substrate consciousness gets refracted into visual, auditory, mental, conceptual, and so forth. Phenomenologically, we can say, where does your mind come from? It comes from the substrate consciousness. But ontologically, your mind, which is one thing, where did it really come from? Was it already there in the substrate, and then it was just unpeeled? Your mind, that one entity, where did it really come from? Not phenomenologically. If it's really there, where did it really come from? And when did it happen? In the course of gestation. Right there with the union of the sperm and egg? Or 8 weeks later, 20 weeks later? I've read scientific accounts of this, and it's all based on blind faith. Even in Scientific American, I just read an article. Based on blind faith. It's like studying geology in a college where everybody in the college, all the professors believe that every word in the Bible is literally true. And now let's study geology. But everybody believes, right? How is the Grand Canyon formed within the last 8,000 years? And they'll say something. It's like studying geology from a religious fundamentalist. And it all makes sense if you believe in the literal truth of every single word in the Bible. And if you don't, it's kind of like, you gotta be kidding. But no, they're not kidding. If you're materialist, anything that conforms with materialism, they'll believe it. But if you don't believe it, you're kind of like, what? Why does anybody believe this crap? It's a church, but it's a stupid church. I hope it finishes quickly and steps aside so that more serious religions can step back in. Where did your mind first emerge from? Your mind. Where did it first come from? And where is it now? We return to that question, location. Where is it? It has a lot of causal efficacy, so don't tell me it doesn't exist at all. But if it does exist, it's got to be located someplace, right? Where? And when it has ceased, when you breathe your last, and your brain is no longer able to contribute to the production of thoughts, memories, and so forth and so on, your brain's now just starting to decompose, and that's not a living body anymore. Where does your mind go? Does it go anywhere? Your mind? Is it Nina's mind that now goes off in the bardo, thinking, I'm Nina, I'm Nina, I'm Nina, I'm Nina, I'm an old woman, except I don't have a woman's body anymore, but still, believe me, I'm still a woman. I'm still German, but they think I'm dead, but I'm still... Really? You think your mind goes someplace? Same old mind? Where's the evidence for that? Where will it go? So those are the three questions in Tibetan, Jungne Dosum. Where did it come from? Did it really come from anywhere? Where is it located? Is it really located anywhere? And sooner or later, whether it's when you fall asleep, or you become comatose, or you faint, or you die, where does it go? And if it doesn't really come from anywhere, isn't really located anywhere, and doesn't really go anywhere, then you can ask, do I really have a mind or not? When each of you says, I, and we say it a lot, right? I, as if we know what we're talking about. And nobody questions. I think we should be ending by 12 o'clock at the latest. What was the referent of that? Where is that I that said, let's not go after noon? If the mind is that which is called I, or myself, the referent of mind, if that's actually me, then it, I, which is equivalent to mind, must have a form and color. Why? Because I have a form and color. Who's going to deny that? Don't tell me I don't have a form and color. Am I tall or short, relatively speaking? Well, if you say, I don't know, you're invisible, then you can leave now. I'm relatively tall, relatively not fat, except for in some places. I have a shape and color, right? I have a form and color. I'm pale face. So I do have a color. It's my complexion. I do have a form, I have a size, a shape, and so forth. I do have that. If anybody denies that, what planet are you living? Surrounded by invisible people. But if the mind is me, then the mind must have the same form and color that I do. But if it doesn't, that which is called I and myself would have no objective referent. That is, the mind has no form or color, and it's me, then the word I doesn't mean anything, because it's referring to something that doesn't have any shape and color, but I do. So, and then he goes on, another interesting point. Very quick, this is so dense. This name of yours, name you got really accustomed to, right? This name of yours was designated by your parents, teacher, and somebody. Somebody gave you the name. I don't think anybody pops out of the moon and said, hi, I'm Alan. Or hi, I'm Yangtang Rinpoche. He made a strong point of that. He said, I never called myself that. And I wasn't that before they called me that. They just gave me this name. So this name of yours was given by somebody else. They gave you something that wasn't yours. And we latch onto it. And then you learn to say, what's your name, little boy? Alan? Because somebody said so. I assume they knew what they're talking about. But then if you exchange your name for another, would you and yourself be exchanged for another? If you are your name, the name is you, then, and I suddenly decide I'm going to go to the official's office and I'm going to tell them my name is Sal. My name's Sal. Salvatore. Just call me Sal. Like the guys in the mafia, Sal. Sal, I'm Sal. I kind of like to feel I'm Sal. Who are you? I'm Sal. Used to be Alan, but Alan, yeah. Sal. Now that's got suave. That's got a real, look out, I'm Sal. Me and my buddies, I'm Sal. They all know who I am. So don't mess with me. Because I'm Sal. Did I make you another person? How about you? We're Alan Wallace, and then suddenly everybody's calling you Champa Kelsang. Identity shift when you take on a monastic name. But it is remarkable, aren't they? Isn't it? That sometimes if somebody makes fun of your name, you might get upset. Bruce. Bruce. Bruce is a name for wimps. You never find a hero named Bruce, except Robert the Bruce. He was one tough dude. And Bruce Springsteen, he's a cool dude. But all the rest of the Bruces are kind of like Bruce. That's why my parents, even they didn't want to call me that. Alan. Neutral. Alan Shepard, Alan Ladd, I don't know, but just... But now we come back. He's not finished yet, not for a long shot. Is the mind just one? Do you have one mind? When we say, I'm of two minds on this, you suddenly have two? Is the mind just one, or is it many? And we're not talking about people with multiple personality syndrome, just, is it many? If it were one, if you really have one entity, like there's one glass of water, there are not two glasses, there's only one glass of water here. It's not debatable. And every sentient being has one mind. It's not minds haver, it's a mind haver. You get one. If it were one, if it were really one entity, how could there be 8 configurations of consciousness, beginning with visual consciousness? Now, these are 8 distinct types of consciousness. One type of consciousness for each of the 5 physical senses, visual, auditory, and so forth. That's already 5. But there's also mental consciousness, by which we're aware of our thoughts, emotions, memories, and so forth. But I'm also aware of not just visual imagery here, as I'm gazing over at Aaron. I'm not just seeing a form here. I know that's a friend of mine, that's Aaron. I know who that is. I'm mentally aware, I know who that is. I'm not just visually aware of his form, but I know who that is. I'm mentally conscious of the presence of Aaron, right? So that's 6. That's the standard list. But we go into Chittamatra, we go into Mahamudra and Dzogchen, and they say there's 2 more that really need to be encountered, confronted, acknowledged. And one is the substrate consciousness. That continuum of consciousness from which all of these other 7 emerge, and into which they all dissolve when you die. Don't count that out. It's called the subtle mind. So that makes 7. Substrate consciousness. But then there's also another one that gets us into all kinds of mischief. And that's in that sequence from the substrate consciousness, afflictive mentation, klishta manas. That's that one. It's very primitive. It's preconceptual. It occurs in frogs and very simple living conscious organisms. But it's klishta manas, and it's the divider. Before klishta manas, there's an experience of space with the substrate, and the substrate consciousness which is coextensive with the substrate, the alaya vijnana. But they're coextensive. There's no divisions. There's a symmetry there. Up or down, center or periphery. No, it's just an equal space permeated by the luminosity of the substrate consciousness. But that, in the course of waking up, or in the course of the development of the mind from the embryo, very early stage of the embryo, then there's this afflictive manas, afflictive mentation, which gets out a knife and makes a cut between spaces over there and awareness is over here. Object, subject. Object, it's just space. Subject, it's just mentation. But there's a fundamental split between subject and object. Nama, rupa, if you go back to the 12 links of dependent origination. Nama, mind. Rupa, form, appearances. And thereon hangs the tail, because that's preconceptual. It's not learned. It's not acquired. You come with that. But on the basis of that, when you then go evolve into subtle and then coarse mentation, then subtle mentation refracts the light of consciousness, the luminosity of consciousness, to experience tactile sensations and sounds and maybe feelings and so forth and so on. It refracts. And then we come out of the womb, then all the 5 are all there. You can see and hear, smell, taste, touch, refracted. And you experience tactile sensations, and you experience your emotions. And so that simple light of the substrate consciousness is now refracted through the prism of mentation. But what started that off was a simple bifurcation of subject and object. and that gets its own category. But those are 8 types of consciousness. If the mind is one, how do 8 become one? 8 people or 5 people don't become one. 5 people on a basketball court, a basketball team, they're 5 players, right? That's the team of such and such in a college or what have you. But the 5 people don't become one. They never become one. They become a team with 5 members. But they don't become one. And of course you can take out one and put in a replacement. 8 modes of consciousness never become one. So is the mind one or is it 8? If the mind were many, one person would have many minds, but that's impossible. You don't really have many minds. Okay, we're not finished. Is the mind permanent, unchanging, and unitary? If they seem like silly questions, don't you sometimes feel, I've always been depressed, or I've always been agitated, I've always felt uneasy, I've always felt anxious, I've always felt insecure, I've always felt low self-esteem? Have you ever anything like that? Or I've always been friendly. It doesn't have to be negative. I've always been quite sanguine. But don't you have a sense, at least on occasion, the mind is. You'll never change. I know you. I've known you since you're a child. You'll never change. I remember when you're 5 years old, you're bigger now, but it's the same you. And you'll never change. You haven't changed, so I'm not going to hold my breath. Are you unchanging? Is the mind unchanging? And is it really unitary? Do you have one mind? And that goes for your mind, it goes for yourself. If it were permanent, unchanging, unitary, how could any mind remember not just one thing, but many? If it's one thing, how could it remember many things? And how could it ever change and move? Because the mind, of course, does change. It gets sleepy, then it's wide awake. It gets angry, then it gets pleasant. It gets happy and sad, and so forth. So, and then your mind presumably is here. It's not outside the chapel, but eventually it will be outside the chapel. Are you going to bring your mind with you, or are you going to leave it here? It's an awful cleanup job after all these people left their minds again. Got to dig a deep hole and bury them out and back, with those other corpses. So the mind seems to move. If the mind is impermanent, he's going to be relentless here. As soon as you think you might have the right answer. If the mind is impermanent, then is the mind impermanent in the sense of being formed and destroyed? And does it then become non-existent? What do you mean by impermanent? Generally speaking, when you speak of something being impermanent, it's like a planet is impermanent. This planet formed with the other planets, I think roughly 5 billion years ago, and it's been here ever since, changing, but still it's a planet. And then sooner or later, the sun's going to go kaboom, and all the planets around it are going to be engulfed by flame, and then it won't be here anymore. So that's coarse impermanence. It formed, and here it is, and then it won't be here anymore, and it will not go anywhere else. It's not going to reincarnate as another planet. It just won't be here anymore. The matter and energy will be shifted into something else. So that's coarse impermanence, like a building. It wasn't there, like the spiritual director's cottage. I remember when that was nothing more than a twinkle in Doug's eye. It was a piece of flat ground. And then it was this blue plastic stuff. That was not a building. And then gradually, it looked more and more like a house. And then it looked more like a house. And then they said, it is a house. And then they let me move in. But sooner or later, it's only a matter of time. That house is already aging. It's already falling apart. I'm sorry. But Aaron, you'll never be able to quite catch up. Because it's going to keep on breaking and breaking and breaking. And then finally, it's going to be a fire. It's going to be flood. It's going to be demolition. It's going to you call that a house? They're going to build a much nicer one for somebody else. And demolish this one. A little too, for the spiritual director don't want more than a two little room cottage. I mean, something. How about some respect here? Sooner or later, it's not going to be there any longer, right? That's coarse impermanence. Is your mind like that? It wasn't there, and now it is, and it's changing, and then it won't be there anymore? Or is it subtle impermanence that is always changing, but it never becomes nothing? Any more than the matter making up the spiritual director's cottage will become nothing. Never can happen. Take my word for it. Never happens that matter turns into nothing, energy turns into nothing. It turns into something else. And the mind transforms into something else. So subtle and coarse impermanence. If the mind is a single appearance, you should be able to see it and point to it. There it is. I've been looking for a long time. There you are, you little sucker. But can you? If the mind is invisible, nothing at all could appear. So it's visible or invisible? If the mind arises, and we come back to this question, he's going to keep on pounding on this one. If the mind arises, from where does it arise? From your parents' minds, from the egg and sperm, from nutriment? Where does it really come from? Was there already a human mind there in the subject consciousness, ready to pop out like a chick out of an egg? Where did it really come from? If the mind stays somewhere, on what basis does it stay? And I'm just thinking, when I read it yesterday, on what basis is it located? It might be better. We're still polishing the translation. And if the mind ceases, where does it cease? Does it cease right where it was? Or does it go off to a mind graveyard and disappear there? So it's coming back to this origin, location, destination again and again. If you think the mind recalls all kinds of things and issues forth in all manner of ways, from where do the memories and thoughts of this mind emerge? Where do they first emerge from? Right now, what sort of essential nature do they have? So he's gone from the mind, one entity, one thing, what does it look like, where is it located, to memories and thoughts. I have a lot of experience on this, right? You're sitting quietly and maybe you're resting in awareness and taking the mind as a path, and you see a memory pop up. A desire pops up, an image pops up. Desire pops up, feeling pop up. Clarity emerge, clarity dissolve. You're resting there in your best approximation of the sign of the mind. That's your internal point of objectivity. That you're observing the tornado from outside the tornado, not from inside the tornado. But now we're getting very specific. Thoughts and memories. You're resting there in stillness. Hopefully you found that still point. You're not thinking, you're not remembering, you're just aware. A thought comes up. Haven't you experienced that? Like sometimes discursive thought? And you wonder, where on earth did that come from? It's kind of like, what's the score? The pie's too hot. I doubt it. It's a bluebird, not a chickadee, stupid. Where are these coming from? Don't tell me I thought that, because I'm not a blithering idiot. They just come up with one fragmented thought after another. But where are they coming from? Resentment, a little. Where do you come from? Where did they actually come from? Suddenly, they're there. But where did they actually come from? Were they like under a blanket and then they popped out like pop goes the memory. Is it like that? They were already inside the box, but then they just popped out? What did it look like before they popped out? And then when they're gone, where'd that little doll go? Back into the box? Where do they actually come from, these thoughts and memories? And he's not asking you to think about it. He's asking you to look into the essential nature. Right now, what sort of essential nature do they have? How are they really? In the end, where do they appear to go and cease? Do these thoughts and memories wander off into a graveyard? Or do they hold their breath and hold their breath and go back underneath into the subject? Where do they go? And if you think the mind is empty like space, we like to say that, don't we? The mind, like my mind is like space. So expansive, so vast. How do various memories and thoughts appear in emptiness? If your mind's like space, space is just empty, right? How can a thought pop out of nothing, out of just emptiness? How is that possible? And then we have the mind's movements. Now, if the mind is dispatched to the space to the east, if Doug is thinking where to put another cabin, and they're thinking, well, maybe east of here there's a bit of space before the green belt, and his mind's going off there, maybe this could be a place for a cabin. When your mind is dispatched to the east, going off to the east. Is there a dispatcher and a mover or not? Is there a separate entity? This is so profound. But is there a dispatcher? Is there an entity that sends another entity off to the east? Is there an agent that sends the mind here, sends the mind down nostalgia lane, back to the past, sends the mind into the future? Is there an entity that's doing that has a mind and sending the mind like a colonel telling his troops, go to the east, go to the west, dig a trench here? Who's in charge here? It raises the very profound point of agency. Are you separate from your mind? Do you dispatch the mind? In case, who do you think you are? If there is a dispatcher and a mover, if there is, what kind of an entity is it that moves? When the mind moves from here to there, what is it that moves from here to there? Right now, and if it is gone, I've lost my mind, where did it go? If it has gone, how far did it go? And just in the time it takes it to return, it would have made a mistake. Is it like a boomerang? You send it off and go whip, 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 whip. It's like that. How does the mind move? How does it circle around? It would have made a circle. Likewise, when you dispatch your mind to each of the four cardinal directions, the 8 intermediate directions, above and below, totaling 10 directions, how does it move? How does your mind move? It doesn't have wheels. It doesn't have an engine. How does the mind move? And what is it that moves? And how does it circle back? I've come back to my senses. Oh, I lost my mind. I was out of my mind for a little while, but now I got it again. What did you get back? How does it circle back? And he says, please think about that. As for the eyes seeing various forms, I can see that's a person over there, not just forms, images. As for the eyes seeing various forms, is it the eyes that see? Or is it mental vision? It's a very important point in Buddhist psychology. In Buddhist psychology, the eyes are just made of matter. The auditory cortex is just made of matter. The optic nerve, the visual cortex, it's just matter. It's, to give the litany, it's fat, it's protein, it's water, and electricity. That's all there is inside the brain. So which of those sees anything? And in Buddhist psychology, the physical eyeballs don't see anything at all. Your ears, let alone the earlobe, but even, inside the auditory cortices, they don't hear anything. But he's asking you for yourself, do your eyes, the eyeballs, do they actually see? Is it the eyes that see, or is it mental vision? If the eyes see, does a corpse also see? Same eyeball. I mean, if it's a fresh corpse, he died 3 seconds ago, and the eyes are going, I look in the movies, he must be dead. Are they still seeing? Same eye. Eye's still in good shape. You could probably do a transplant right now and give it to somebody else. If the mind sees, if the mind sees, wait a minute, so if the eye sees, does the corpse also see? But if you say, no, it's not the eyes that see, it's the mind that sees, does the mind have eyes? Does the mind have eyes? If the mind sees form without having eyes, do the blind also see forms? And I have such good fortune. Years ago, when I was teaching in Santa Barbara, a man came a couple of times to retreats that I led, and he was not born blind, he became blind. doesn't at all. He became blind. And I asked him, when you dream, do you still see forms? Do you see colors, people, forms, images? And he said, I have to work at it. During the daytime, I have to keep on remembering what a tree looks like, and the color, and remembering the smell of grapefruit, and hearing. I have to remember hearing the sound of the Moonlight Sonata, and taste. I have to remember the taste, and I have to remember the tactile field of cotton. And if I keep on remembering it, then yes, in my dreams they come back. But if I'm just lazy and said, I'm blind now, give it a break, if I don't exercise it, then after a while the imagery, the smell, taste, touch, and so forth that you experience in a dream, you have much more boring dreams. But you can see, even if your optic nerve is severely damaged, or visual cortex, you can see in a dream. And this begs the question, and it's huge and almost universally ignored. It's like this intentional ignorance by the mainstream cognitive scientific community. But according to rigorous research from people like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker and Bruce Grayson and so forth at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, people whose brain has gone flatlined. There are many, many accounts, and some of them extremely compelling. They are seeing things in the operation room and hearing things in the operation room when their eyes are plugged and their ears are jammed and the brain is not active, and they're seeing, and not only seeing, they're seeing veridically. Explain that, put that in your pipe and smoke it. And it's too much evidence to say, oh no, this is New Age. And I'm sorry, it's evidence. If you don't like it, then just say, I don't like that evidence, but don't pretend it doesn't exist. And way beyond that, going again to the research of Ian Stevenson and his progeny, in the bardo. In the bardo, you can see and hear. You can see people that you can visit, you drop in on your funeral. You can hear people talk, you can hear you're clairvoyant, you can hear them thinking. Right? And this is from the Buddha himself. This is not some later Tibetan artifact. It's in the Pali Canon. And the Buddha describes the different phases of the Antara Bhava. It's the bardo, and the Buddha himself taught it. And you can see other bardo beings. But your body is decomposing, or maybe it was incinerated, maybe it's cremated. But you're seeing and hearing. And you're traveling from here to there at the speed of thought. So to ignore this, and there's so much evidence, even from modern science, let alone centuries and centuries of contemplative inquiry, this is intentional stupidity. So yeah, you can see, and people who've had any of these near-death experiences or post-death experiences, and there are some very, very compelling accounts, say what came as a huge surprise for me is my visual and auditory perceptions when, after my brain had stopped functioning, were far more vivid than my ordinary sight and hearing in the ordinary waking state. And one woman is interviewed by the National Geographic, not exactly a New Age organization. She reported to them, it's now been years since I had that out-of-body experience. And my memories of that experience are not as vivid now as they were at the time. They're incandescent. It was a heightened form of consciousness, not diminution, but the brain had nothing to do with it because the brain was AWOL. And anybody ignores that, then hang up your spurs as a scientist. If you're not open-minded, you have no right to call yourself a scientist. Really no right. So they're getting away with a lot of stuff they should never get away with. But it's groupthink, and that has no place in science, and yet it does. So if the mind sees forms without having eyes, do the blind also see forms? The answer is, yeah, if they work at it. If they're born blind, no. Unless they go into deep samadhi and retrieve visual imagery from the past life. That's a possibility. Because memories of form are stored in the substrate consciousness, and that you brought with you. Likewise, carefully examine how the ears hear sounds, how the nose detects smells, the tongue experiences taste, and how bodily sensations are felt. All of these are refracted light from the substrate consciousness. They originate from mentation, manifesting as visual and so forth, That's phenomenologically. When hatred, pride, envy, attachment, and delusion arise, do they arise in the body or the mind? Again, don't believe the hearsay that these are in the brain just because they're correlated with brain activity. Again, it's very, very primitive thinking to think they have to be located in the same place. They arise in the body, there's no evidence for that at all. To say that emotions are stored in your gut or emotions are stored in your heart, I can't say that's literally true. And why? Because these are mental phenomena. They have no physical qualities, so they can't be located in physical space. Where is the square root of -2 located? Where is E equals mc squared located? It's a categorical error to ask the question. Because if something has no physical qualities whatsoever, and they ask where is it located in physical space, that doesn't make any sense. It's a question that can't be answered because it's a bad question. If something has physical properties, located in physical space. If it has none, then to say where is E equals mc squared located, in what part of Einstein's brain? Go away, you're wasting my time. Do they arise in the body or the mind? If they arise in the body, will they arise in a corpse as well? Are they still there? If they arise in the mind, how and from where do they first arise? Back to the questions. Where do they come from? In what way does the mind in which hatred and so on arise exist right now? And are the mind and hatred the same or distinct? This is crucial. Really, really crucial. When we look upon an individual and say, this person is so narcissistic, this person is so egocentric, this person is so dishonest, what we're saying is, this person's mind is saturated all the time by narcissism, by hatred, by egotism, by greed, by hatred, by contempt, and so forth. We're saying that. But is that really true? People who are very narcissistic, are they narcissistic when they're in deep sleep? Are they narcissistic when they're drinking a bottle of Coca-Cola? Are they really the same? And when we see they're definitely not the same, then we can feel compassion for the person, but you never feel compassion for contempt or hatred or not. Never feel compassion for mental affliction. That's stupid. They're not sentient. They're not sentient beings. They deserve no pity. Are the mind and hatred the same or distinct? Finally, where do hatred and so on cease and vanish? A person can be very hateful for a long, long time. One of my beloved teachers, I'll keep him anonymous, I think, Tibetan teacher. He was in Lhasa on March 10th, 1959. He was right there. And he saw the savagery with which the soldiers would come in and with a machine gun and wipe out a household, wipe out a mob, just killing indiscriminately. He saw the savagery, the brutality, the racism. He witnessed it right there. He was there. For years he could never forgive them. He bore it in his heart like a cold stone. I can forgive many things, but what I witnessed, that's unforgivable. We had not done, I'm speaking for him now, we had not done anything against them. And they murdered us in the street. They murdered us in our homes. That I can't forgive. He's a very fine man. I knew him well. He's one of my teachers. Not a lama, but a very educated Tibetan. And then he told me, this was years ago, he met with His Holiness. Would have been back in the 70s. Met with His Holiness. His Holiness knew his mind. I can't quote, but he told me. His Holiness told him, you've got to let it go. This resentment is just eating you up. It's not in accordance with the Buddhist teachings. It's only of harm. It's time for you to release it now. he did. And he did. And from that point onwards, he made a point. Whenever he'd see a Chinese person, you see him in India, here and there. Whenever he'd see a Chinese person, he'd go out of his way to express his friendship and his warmth and his acceptance. People change if they wish to. So where did his hatred go? Regarding what are known as the mind's conceptualizations or its movements, all the activities of the mind, the hurly-burly, from where do the appearances of these various memories and thoughts first emerge? Where do they really come from? Not simply the cause and contingent independence upon which they arise. That's pratitya-samutpada. That we studied in the last section, contemplative psychology. What were the factors of origination of hatred? What were the factors of dissolution of hatred? That's phenomenology. That's good. But if they're really existent, where do they really come from? From where do they first emerge? Where do they exist? Do they exist? And if they exist, where do all the conceptualizations that will arise tomorrow come from today? Are you holding them as embryos? Little potentialities waiting to pop forth like a baby out of a womb? Here I am. I was in the womb of my mind yesterday, but here I am. Is it like that? Where do all the conceptualizations that will arise tomorrow come from today? And where are they? Once they've arisen, well, actually, where are they? They torment you so much. But where are they? And where did the conceptualization from yesterday up until now go? All the negative thoughts and emotions and the ones you had yesterday, where are they now? Are they in a bag someplace? Are they stored in your frontal cortex? Where are they? Where are these conceptualizations of the present located? And don't ask any scientists because they don't know, so you better find out for yourself. Okay, that's it. Now we can move on a bit faster, and we will end at noon, I do believe. That's my prediction. That was it. You see, there wasn't one answer there. There wasn't one article of faith. There wasn't taking anything on authority or belief. He just said, ehi pasika, see for yourself. And now he's going to wrap up. Think about these questions carefully, then analyze and investigate. Thinking carefully, analyzing, that's philosophical inquiry. Philosophers are very good at that. And then investigate. That's what contemplatives do. And that's how you move from belief to knowledge. This is important, so don't be pretentious. You're not allowed to respond after asking others. Find the smartest person in the class and say, what do you think? And then, oh, I got the right answer now. It's a waste of time. You're not allowed to respond after asking others, asking somebody else their opinion, or asking somebody senior. Oh, tell me, what did you find? This is something to be known for yourself. So you must see this you must see this yourself. If you don't, it's not okay to bluff your way through by following after what others say. This is standard fare in universities. Standard fare in schools. Monkey see, monkey do. The teacher said it was in the exam, it was in the textbook, therefore that's the right answer. Okay, I got the right answer. But you're just saying something that somebody else said. Then you're being a parrot. What's the point? That's not an education, that's brainwashing. So bluffing your way through meditation is said to be not even worthy of a dog. If you lack decisive, definitive knowledge of your own, and you offer explanations by way of analogies and anecdotes, just by knowing the words, while pretending to have your own realization, that's unacceptable. I think we could say fraudulent. That is a case of a person, of a crude scoundrel who is familiar with Dharma, turning the Dharma into misery. So pretending to have knowledge that other people do have, and then pretending that he or she, him or herself has it, and then it just turns into misery because it's all fraudulent. It's a scam. Right? Therefore, do not explain out of a dry understanding, purely intellectual thinking, it's like this. Based on analogies, well, it's like this, and anecdotes, and he said this, and so forth. For this will lead to your covering your own head, like wrapping a cloth around your head and blinding yourself. So I've often quoted the historian who wrote the book, The Discoverers, and saying the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge. It's thinking you know something that you don't. And that's the greatest obstacle. It's very prevalent, probably at all times. But people merely believing something and believing that's knowledge. And then once you believe in your illusion of knowledge, what appears to you to be knowledge, it's not at all. You're just saying what other people said or drawing conclusions based on utterly inconclusive evidence. But once you think you know, and you recite some formula, the mind is what the brain does. Emotions are located in the amygdala. Hatred arises in the hippocampus. Stuff you've just heard. Since you think you know, then you'll stop asking questions. And you just go along like a herd of blind lemmings, racing towards death. Not knowing, but not knowing you don't know, and therefore not even trying to know, because you've just accepted the brainwashing. That's not education. That's a poor, crappy substitute for education. A dry rope needs to be cut in water. The dry intellect, intellectual conclusions, and so forth, need to be drenched in experience, in your own experience, your own seeking, your own conclusions. Then you can cut the rope of ignorance. And so he says, now seek complete and conclusive knowledge that reaches down into your bones, and you will have something to say. So he's not talking about belief here. But he's saying knowledge, conclusive, decisive, radical and transformative knowledge is possible, and don't be satisfied with anything less. If you think, I have searched but I have not found, don't lose heart. Don't give up. You have acquired a precious human body replete with leisure and endowments, the 18. When such profound advice, from which the moist breath of the Dakinis has not yet evaporated, is taught, if you do not find, will you do so when you're born as an animal, and so on? Right now, for reasons that are inexplicable to modern science, we have this extraordinary level of intelligence, creativity, memory, language skills, imagination, immeasurably beyond anything we possibly need for survival and procreation. There is no biological account for how come we are so intelligent in comparison to animals, for example. There's no evolutionary explanation. I've asked some world-class evolution. They don't know. They just start talking without knowing what they're talking about. So here we have this opportunity. Biologically, the correlation is the frontal cortex. This intelligence we have only for a while. And then, as we get older, and the brain gets to be 80 years old and 85, maybe we'll live to 90, 95, the brain just ain't what it used to be. So even in this lifetime, while we're still able to survive, probably not procreate, but the brain has a half-life. You know, it's like buying a can of food. They do not eat after such and such date, because it will be no longer, it will be spoiled. So in even this lifetime, we never know we're going to get a stroke. At my age, any day is just as good as any other. Stroke, heart attack, whatever. 74 years old, as one old friend of mine said, you're too old to say you died young. But we have it now, you know, make hay while the sun shines. While the brain's still, is there any better use to which you can put your brain, and therefore your mind, than understanding the actual nature of the mind and who you are? Building a company, developing more software, better technology, raising kids, being a good spouse, all of those are fine. But you don't need near the intelligence you have for those. But we have enough intelligence to do this. Or, in quote, if I don't find my mind, I won't have to experience suffering again. As if I don't find it, therefore it must not exist. And if it doesn't exist, then I won't have to suffer anymore. Well, that's bollocks. That's silly. If you can't find the mind will find you. You can't run fast enough. I know some people get really fed up with meditation. I've had it. I don't want to do this anymore. It's boring, or it's uncomfortable, or I'm really fed up. And they drive off in their cars. And I haven't quite said it, but I could say, I hope you drive fast enough that you can leave the mind and your body behind. Drive really fast so the mind can't catch up with you. And then you may have made a really good escape. But if you bring the same body and the same mind in the car with you as you're driving away, you're bringing with you everything you thought you were leaving behind. Good luck. If you can't find your mind, he says, report on this way of not finding. If you're looking and looking, location, I can't find it, origin, I can't find it, then report on you're not finding it. And draw this crucial distinction, many of you know, but you must know, the difference between not finding and finding that something is not findable. I've met many, many scientists that, oh, you Buddhists believe this and that, but who's ever seen that? Because they haven't seen it, they believe nobody has. They haven't seen it. And I'm a scientist, I haven't seen it, then nobody's seen it. One actually said that. We don't know the nature of consciousness. Nobody knows the nature of consciousness. Boy, did I give him whiplash when I corrected him on that. And so you can't find it, big deal. Might it still be there and you just haven't looked hard enough? Have you found that it's nowhere to be found? Do you know what it said when it said in the sutras? None of the Buddhas of the past have ever seen the mind. None of the Buddhas of the present see the mind. None of the Buddhas of the future will ever see the mind. Do you get it? Did they not look hard enough? Can you outsmart the Buddha? I found it, it's in the frontal cortex. Yeah, right. So, even if you see a form, you look for it and you see a form, color and so on, there's no need to be afraid to report on that. If you say, I look for the mind, and I found it was kind of like this effervescent, silverish, glimmering, luminous. That's what I found. Cool. Report. If that's what you saw, report it. And nobody will laugh at you, but they may not accept it. If the 10 signs and so on can appear at any time to those of fine intelligence, the 10 signs and so on can appear at any time to those of fine intelligence whose channels or nadis are in excellent condition. I'm not going to give the whole list of them, but these are 10 signs in advanced Vajrayana practice indicative of the pranas coming into the central channel and into the heart chakra and so forth. And they're signs of smoke, a mirage, clouds, and so forth. They can occur as a result of very rigorous, intensive contemplative training at a very high level, or on occasion they can just come up. That can happen. So all kinds of things can happen. Therefore, he's just now concluding. We have 10 minutes, good. Therefore, from tomorrow onward, now you are supposed to have 6 weeks, so you can throttle back a bit. Have time for a cup of tea, even lunch. But for these people, boy, he's cracking the whip. From now until tomorrow morning, seek with a sense of personal responsibility, and that will suffice. You don't need to seek continually. That is, you can go to the bathroom if you want to, or stop for a meal and maybe go for a walk. It doesn't have to be all the time. But if you don't search decisively through tomorrow morning, there will be no benefit if you put it off until later. Like, this is hot out of the oven. These are like fresh baked cookies. They've just heard this, the last 2.5 pages. Those men in the audience, they're probably a whole bunch of monks in the 17th century there, out there in Amdo. They've just heard this from the lips of this incredibly erudite and profoundly realized master Kamachamé. Incredible insight, realization. They've just heard it. So he's saying, strike while the iron's hot. The cookies are fresh out of the oven. Eat them now. Don't put it off and say, oh, I'll get to it day after tomorrow, but tomorrow I'm, as one person said, I'm kind of dharma'd out. I remember that at one Dharma center. Rinpoche gave one day of teaching, and the next day he didn't show up. He was the head of the center. And we saw him later, just before Rinpoche left. He said, well, where were you yesterday? He said, I got dharma'd out. Okay, your call. If you had something better to do, then you should do that. So from tomorrow onward, all of you who have not received instruction previously should explain what you have seen for yourselves to the stewards for these instructions. And do so without reservation. Should explain without reservation what you've seen for yourselves to the stewards for these instructions. Even if you have received this guidance in the past, if you've not yet identified your mind, explain what you have seen to a steward for these instructions. Now this, I think, must have been in one of those ideal settings, because he's giving these really intensive, day after day, just earth-shattering instructions that would change your whole world. And said, look for yourself. But in this community, there must have been some senior students who had already spent, a lot of time in meditation, following the instruction, not the first time they've heard it. They've gained some genuine insight. And so they are like, to draw a weak analogy, they're like graduate students in a university who are serving as teaching assistants for a lecture course. And the professor, maybe it's a world-class professor at Harvard or what have you, gives a breathtakingly brilliant lecture on something, and then he says, now if you have any questions, you have a section tomorrow, and there will be a TA there who's really very, very capable. So if you have any questions or you want to report, then report to the steward. The steward is not me, I'm the full professor here, but these stewards are very capable of listening to you and responding and clarifying any uncertainties or ignorance or doubts that you have. They're TAs. In the university, it was just like that. They have some senior students who've been meditating for years, who are well-versed, knowledgeable, and they're available. So find a steward, and the professor will tell you, he's a steward, she's a steward, etc., etc. And they will listen to you, and they'll respond, like a TA, except that this is like the best university in the world for achieving liberation. And so now to step back for just a minute, here at our little fledgling community, where the chick has just broken through the egg and it's walking around its wobbly little cheeky legs. That's what we have here, is a little fledgling community. But the little chicks are Garudas. They're not chickens. They're Garuda chicks. And we are training the Garuda chicks here to be stewards. They're contemplatives in training. So in an optimal circumstance, we'd all be living here and have nothing else to do except for practice Dharma and follow these instructions. Then I, taking on the role for the time being as a professor, I'll disappear back into my cottage, which is what I'll do at noon. I'll be invisible for a while. But we would have some yogis who'd been here for 4, 5, 6 years, and we could point to them, well, okay, I'm going to disappear now, I'll see you in 6 weeks, but if you have questions, there is this person, there's this person, there's this person, and there's this person, and this person. These people really know the neighborhood. Check in with them. They will speak for me, because I know they have good, solid knowledge, and they are the stewards. So we are training people here to become stewards, and eventually to become full professors, eventually to be fully qualified lamas. That's the whole point here. And to be able to collaborate with psychologists, neuroscientists, physicists, philosophers, educators, and mental health care professionals. So whatever we know and not merely believe can be shared with those who don't know. And share the wealth, because the wealth we received here is just absolutely fabulous. That's a steward. Since this guidance has the crucial point, being complete in all respects, This is 3 pages. Complete in all respects. If you want to fathom, know, integrate down to the marrow of your bones, down into your DNA, what is the actual nature of the mind? Where does it come from? Located, where does it go? What is its actual nature? Everything you need to know is here in these questions. And then consult with a steward. But it's complete in all respects. In 3 pages, he didn't leave out anything. If you want to achieve liberation or enlightenment, you can't skip this. You can skip this text if you like. This is one text. But you can't achieve liberation or enlightenment and not still know the actual nature of your mind and what it means to have a mind and whether or not you really even have a mind that defines you. Or is that simply an empty appearance? So this guide has a crucial point of being complete in all respects. So since that, you must seek. Now's the time. If you don't come to a conclusion by tomorrow morning, you won't be purified to receive the teaching at tomorrow's Dharma session. Talk about intense. You think I'm intense. He's intense. I'm a wuss that gives you 6 weeks. He gives you 1 day. And he said, if you haven't fathomed it by tomorrow, you won't be ready for tomorrow's teaching. But tomorrow's teaching is going to go on with or without you. But you won't be able to receive it any more than you can receive the teachings of Vipassana if you haven't made really significant progress in Śamatha. Can't happen. That was the Buddha, that was Karmachamit, that's Shantideva. That's all the people who know what's going on say. You need the telescope if you're going to be an astronomer. You need the technology of samadhi if you're going to know your mind. There is no substitute. You won't be purified to receive the teaching at tomorrow's Dharma session. So for tomorrow's session, on the uncommon teachings on Vipassana, there'll just be a bunch of words that will go right through in one ear and out the other one if you're not purified, haven't really gotten into your bones the import of today's teaching. But today's teaching, as he said in the preceding chapter, you won't get today's teaching unless you've really made some progress in Śamatha. But now those of you who have been practicing Śamatha for some time, and there are people who persist, and there are people who persist and then give up. That's just a fact. No surprise there. There are people that try, and they just, for whatever reason, all kinds of reasons, say, not for me. I think my time in retreat is finished. Did I achieve Śamatha? No, but I'm going to find something else to do. Anything but this. And anywhere but here. Fine. No shame. Don't want to be here? Don't be here. No skin off my nose. I'm going to continue meditating no matter what. If you haven't absorbed into your bones the 4 revolutions in outlook, that they are simply the way you view reality, completely appreciated and incorporated the import, the significance of a precious human rebirth of leisure and endowment. You're not eating and breathing every moment of the day the reality of impermanence, mortality, that death could come at any moment. If you're not completely fathomed, there's no place in samsara that you're going to ever be able to find that will give you an enduring sense of well-being. It doesn't exist. Nowhere you can go. Drive as fast as you like. But what you're going to find is aging, sickness, and death. There's no fun place in samsara for long. And whatever you do, there are consequences. You may be able to hide them from everybody else, but you'll still experience the maturation of your deeds, good or bad. Every intentional deed has consequences. When you fathom that, and then you ask, what shall I do with my life? There's only one answer. Dharma. And if you seek liberation, then get to it. Śamatha, Vipassana, and then the path. If there's another way that were easier, boy, I would have followed that. So, without the 4 revolutions, you're not ready for Śamatha. Because you get into Śamatha and you're going to find after a while, this just isn't fun at all. This is not what I signed up for. I want it to be peaceful. This isn't peaceful. I want it to be pleasant. This is not pleasant. I wanted to make some real progress. Not like I wanted. This is not what I signed up for. Good, sign up for something else. But this is the path to liberation. And if there's easy way, the Buddha would have taught that. But he didn't. So remain in solitude. Adopt the qualities of the vital points of your posture and ask in what way your mind exists. Then you'll have something to say tomorrow morning. Very important. If you carefully seek out the mind, you will come to a decisive conclusion in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. You'll search, not find, and then pow! Then there's going to be opening in the clouds. And you'll know something. And you can say what you know. You can say what you saw. But it takes a bit of effort before it takes just a cup of tea. But he's speaking from experience. So for those of you who have something to say, then start this evening. Then starting this evening, you should speak to the steward. Just 2 minutes past. Last year, a very short paragraph. Thus, to dedicate the roots of virtue from offering this Dharma session on the Vipassana held in common, which cuts through conceptualizations from within, so that all sentient beings of the 6 classes of existence may swiftly realize connate primordial consciousness. Please recite 3 times after me. And I'll give you the line just after this one brief comment. This Vipassana, which cuts conceptual elaborations from within, is not by reading a book or hearing a really good lecture or getting something from outside. We have acquired delusions. Materialism is an acquired delusion. Nobody's born that way. But it is complete delusion. But you have to learn it. And then you can unlearn it. You can read a book and you can unlearn it. Come and go, from outside. Racism. Nobody's born a racist. But you can be a racist, and then you can open up your eyes and say, but people of that skin color or whatever, actually, I've been looking, they're not inferior at all. What was I thinking? Or misogyny that's plagued human civilization for as long as there's been human civilization. You have to learn that. Babies don't know that. But when you wake up and say, but wait a minute, that which was taken for granted right through the 19th century, that's crap. And you can unlearn misogyny and never be a misogynist ever again. Never be a materialist again, never be a racist again. You can do that from the outside by looking and watching. Oh, but wait a minute, what I was told is false. But he's not talking about acquired delusion here. He's talking about eradicating these conceptual elaborations from within. These are the ones you're born with. It's not your parents, not your genes, not your education, not your society, not modern times. But it's the ones you're born with that are a root of suffering. And those you can cut, but only from inside, by finding out for yourself. So with this in mind, please recite 3 times after me. Let's do so. I'll say it in English. There's only one line and we're finished. I dedicate this virtue to all beings.
I dedicate this virtue to all beings.
In the 6 classes of existence.
In the 6 classes of existence.
Who have been my old mother.
Who have been my old mother.
I dedicate this virtue to all beings.
I dedicate this virtue to all beings.
In the 6 classes of existence.
In the 6 classes of existence.
Who have been my old mother.
Who have been my old mother.
I dedicate this virtue to all beings.
I dedicate this virtue to all beings.
In the 6 classes of existence.
In the 6 classes of existence.
Who have been my old mother.
Who have been my old mother.
And this concludes the 16th chapter on the analytical cultivation of Vipassana. So we have 6 weeks to come to knowledge, right? It's good. All right. Thank you. It's been a blessing having you here. You bless our environment here as we are blessed by the Dharma. So I wish you all well and look forward to seeing you soon.